Project Teguk activated on the morning of the second day. Around the world, hidden doors opened in mountains. Secret facilities that had waited decades for this moment came online. Automated factories deep underground began producing weapons at incredible speed. These were not normal weapons. They were based on theories that Dr. Minho and hundreds of other scientists had developed over 30 years. The Varix forces expected another day of easy conquest. Instead, they encountered plasma cannons rising from hidden bunkers. Railguns mounted on mountains opened fire. Energy shields protected major cities that had seemed defenseless the day before. The alien commander Talmor watched his tactical display in confusion. Yesterday, Earth had primitive chemical rockets and metal bullets. Today they had weapons that matched Varix technology. General Jiwan took command of Earth's unified military forces. She was 52 years old and had spent her entire career studying asymmetric warfare. That meant fighting when the enemy was stronger than you. She knew every trick of guerrilla combat, every way to turn weakness into advantage. Now she would use all of it on a planetary scale. She sat in the deep command bunker and looked at the global tactical map. The Varix had ships over every continent. They controlled the sky and most of space around Earth, but they did not control the ground. And on the ground, humanity had advantages. Jiwan began giving orders to military units across the planet. Her strategy was simple. Make the aliens come down to Earth's surface. Make them fight in forests, cities, mountains, and oceans. Make them fight in places where their technology mattered less and human knowledge of terrain mattered more. The plan worked better than anyone expected. Varix ground forces landed in the Amazon rainforest to secure resources. They found themselves fighting human soldiers who knew every tree, every river, every hidden path. The aliens had sensors that could see through walls, but the dense jungle confused their equipment. They had weapons that could destroy tanks, but they struggled to hit targets that disappeared into thick vegetation after every shot. In the Himalayas, Varix troops landed to establish a base. The altitude affected their equipment in ways they had not anticipated. Human soldiers, trained for mountain warfare, attacked from higher positions. Avalanches and rock slides destroyed alien vehicles. The Varix had conquered a dozen worlds, but those worlds were mostly flat desert planets or simple ocean worlds. Earth was complicated. Sergeant Deho led a special forces team in the Amazon. He was 34 years old and had spent 10 years in covert operations. His team specialized in infiltration and sabotage. When a Varix destroyer crashed in the rainforest after being hit by surface-to-air missiles, Deho's team reached it before the alien survivors could be rescued. They moved through the jungle at night, avoiding Varix search parties. The crashed ship was enormous, half buried in the forest floor. Its hull was cracked open, exposing the interior. Deho's team entered through a rupture in the side. Inside, they found dying alien crew members and working computers. Deho was not a scientist, but he knew how to follow instructions. Dr. Minho was on a video link, guiding him through the alien systems. What they discovered changed everything. The Varix ships were controlled by artificial intelligence. The computers made most tactical decisions. The crew just followed orders from machines.
Minho realized this was their greatest weakness.
If you could predict what the computer would decide, you could predict what the Varix would do. And if you could predict it, you could beat it. Minho designed a computer virus. It was clever. It did not shut down Varix systems. Instead, it made them give wrong information. Sensors would report enemies in places where there were none. Navigation systems would give incorrect coordinates. Communication arrays would introduce delays and garbled messages. Deho uploaded the virus into the crash destroyer's main computer. From there, it spread through the Varix communication network like a disease. Within hours, Varix forces across Earth began making mistakes. Ships fired at the wrong targets. Ground troops went to the wrong locations. Supply convoys delivered resources to empty areas. The aliens became confused and paranoid. They started to distrust their own sensors and computers. When soldiers cannot trust their equipment, they become slow and hesitant. Hesitation in combat is deadly. Meanwhile, a young engineer named Yeji was making her own contribution to the war effort. She was 26 years old and had been working for a civilian aerospace company before the invasion. When the war started, she volunteered her skills to the military. They gave her an impossible task: take civilian cargo ships and turn them into warships in less than a week. Yeji looked at the collection of old freighters, passenger ships, and industrial vessels that had been gathered in a secret harbor. They were not designed for combat. They had no armor, no weapons, no shields, but they had engines and they could fly. That was enough to start with. She began working 18-hour days, welding military-grade weapons onto civilian hulls. She reinforced structures with whatever materials were available. She installed targeting computers taken from destroyed tanks. The results were ugly. The ships looked like they had been built from spare parts by someone who did not care about aesthetics. But they worked. They could fly into orbit. They could shoot. They could take damage and keep fighting. More importantly, there were hundreds of them. For every military vessel Earth had lost in the first days of fighting, Yeji's converted civilian fleet provided 3 replacements. General Jiwan launched her first major counterattack 2 weeks into the war. She coordinated attacks simultaneously on 5 continents. Human forces struck Varric's landing zones with everything they had. Artillery, missiles, aircraft, and armored vehicles hit the aliens from every direction. Yeji's converted civilian ships attacked Varric's supply vessels in orbit. The aliens had never experienced this kind of coordinated planetary resistance before. Major Hana led fighter squadrons in the orbital battle. She had been promoted after her actions on the first day. Now she commanded 300 pilots from 12 different nations. They flew together, covering each other, using tactics that Hana had developed through trial and error. The Varric's pilots were still superior in individual skill, but human pilots worked as teams. They sacrificed personal glory for group success. One of Hana's pilots discovered another weakness in Varric's shields. When an alien ship was moving fast and then suddenly stopped or turned, the shield took a fraction of a second to adjust. During that tiny moment, it was vulnerable. Hana immediately changed her squadron's tactics. They would bait Varric ships into chasing them, then stop suddenly or make sharp turns. When the alien ships followed the same maneuvers, human fighters would hit them in that vulnerable instant. Commander Talmor watched his forces take losses for the first time. He had fought in 7 planetary invasions before Earth. None had lasted more than 3 days. Earth was now in week 2 and humans were getting stronger, not weaker. His superiors in the Varric's dominion sent messages demanding explanations. He had no good answers. How could he explain that primitive humans were defeating advanced Varric's technology? The truth was becoming clear to Talmor, though he refused to say it out loud. The Varrics had become too dependent on their technology. They had forgotten how to adapt, how to think creatively, how to fight with determination instead of just superior firepower. Humans had all those things. They were weaker but hungrier. They were less advanced but more desperate, and desperation made them dangerous. Ambassador Kyung-soo worked day and night coordinating with civilian populations. Millions of people had died, but billions remained. They needed food, water, medical care, and shelter. The infrastructure of modern civilization was breaking down under the stress of global warfare. Kyung-soo organized refugee movements, supply distribution, and emergency medical systems. It was not glamorous work like leading troops in battle, but it was just as important. He also began a different kind of campaign. He recorded messages that were broadcast on every possible frequency. The messages were not for humans. They were for any aliens who might be listening. He talked about why humanity was fighting. He explained that Earth wanted peace but would never accept slavery. He described human history, the wars fought for freedom, the struggles against oppression. He wanted the galaxy to know that Earth's resistance was not just about survival. It was about dignity. Some of those messages reached other species in the Varric's dominion, worlds that had been conquered generations ago and had accepted their fate. They heard about Earth's resistance and felt something they had not felt in years: hope. Small resistance movements began to form on Varric's controlled planets. They did not do much at first. A sabotaged factory here, a destroyed supply depot there. But it was a beginning. By the end of the first month, the war had reached a stalemate. The Varrics controlled the space around Earth and most of the orbital area, but they had failed to conquer the planet's surface. Human forces held their ground in fortified positions. The aliens could destroy cities from orbit, but that would eliminate the resources they came to take. They needed Earth intact. That meant fighting on the ground. And on the ground, humans were winning more often than they were losing. General Jiwan looked at the updated casualty reports. The ship appeared without warning in Earth orbit. It was unlike any vessel humans or Varrics had seen before. The hull seemed to shift colors constantly, as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. No weapons were visible, But the ship radiated a sense of ancient power. Military forces across Earth detected it immediately and prepared for another attack. Then they received a message. The Galactic Council had sent an observer. Observer Rental represented the Luminari, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. Her people had been exploring space when most other civilizations were still learning to make fire. The Luminari rarely interfered in galactic affairs. They watched, studied, and recorded history. But Earth's resistance against the Variks had caught their attention. Ambassador Kyung-soo met with Rintal in a neutral location, a small asteroid between Earth and Mars. She appeared humanoid but clearly alien. Her skin was translucent, revealing what looked like stars flowing beneath the surface. Her eyes were solid silver with no pupils. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere at once. She explained that the Galactic Council was a loose organization of advanced civilizations. They maintained peace through mutual agreement and rarely involved themselves in conflicts between younger species. The Variks Dominion was not part of the Council, but was tolerated because they usually kept their conquest limited. However, Earth's situation was different. A primitive world successfully resisting Variks' invasion had never happened before. Kyung-soo asked if the Council would help Earth. Rintal's response was careful. The Council would not interfere directly. They had rules about involving themselves in wars between younger species. But they would not stop Earth from defending itself either. She also mentioned something important. The entire galaxy was watching. Every species with the ability to receive broadcasts was following Earth's fight. Many were inspired. Some were terrified. Before leaving, Rintal gave Kyung-soo a gift. It was a data crystal containing information about the galaxy, star charts showing thousands of inhabited worlds, basic information about different species and their cultures. It was not military intelligence, but it was valuable. For the first time, humans understood their place in the larger galactic community. They were very new, very young, and very small, but they had earned respect through their refusal to surrender. General Jiwon used this information to plan new operations. She now knew which species in the Variks Dominion had been conquered most recently. Those worlds would be most likely to support resistance movements. Earth began sending secret communications to dozens of planets. The messages were simple. We fought back and survived. You can too. Here is what we learned. Meanwhile, Dr. Minho led a dangerous mission into space. Earth intelligence had located an intact Variks battlecruiser orbiting Jupiter. The massive ship had been damaged in a battle and abandoned by its crew. Minho wanted that ship. It contained technology and data that could change the course of the war. The mission was risky. The ship might have security systems that would destroy it if anyone approached. But the potential reward was worth the risk. Admiral Soo-hyun commanded the recovery mission. His fleet approached the battlecruiser carefully. Sensors showed no life signs, no active systems. The ship looked dead, but appearances could be deceiving with alien technology. Soo-hyun sent robots ahead to test for traps. They found none. The ship was truly abandoned. Boarding teams entered the vessel wearing protective suits. The interior was dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered occasionally. The ship had been built for beings much larger than humans. Corridors were twice as tall as needed. Doors were massive slabs of metal. Everything had a quality of excessive size, as if the Variks wanted to remind everyone of their physical superiority. Dr. Minho found the main computer core. It was still powered by emergency systems. He connected his equipment and began downloading data. The amount of information was staggering. Complete star charts of the Variks Dominion, detailed records of every planet they controlled, communication protocols, military strategies, political structures. It was a treasure trove of intelligence. One file particularly interested Minho. It contained psychological profiles of every species the Variks had conquered. The profiles explained why each species had surrendered so easily. Most had been technologically primitive, but a few had been advanced. They surrendered because they calculated that resistance was mathematically impossible. They were logical, rational, and pessimistic. They looked at the numbers and gave up. Humans were different. Humans were optimistic to the point of foolishness. They saw impossible situations and tried anyway. They believed in luck, fate, miracles, and determination. From a purely logical perspective, human behavior made no sense. But logic did not account for the power of hope. Hope made people do irrational things. Sometimes those irrational things worked. While Minho was recovering data, Major Hana led a reconnaissance mission into deep space. Her squadron flew stealth ships equipped with the new cloaking technology that engineer Yeji had developed. Their mission was to scout Varric's industrial facilities in the outer solar system. Intelligence suggested the aliens were building a massive new invasion fleet. What Hana found confirmed the worst fears. The Varrics were constructing hundreds of new warships in a hidden shipyard beyond Neptune. The facility was enormous, larger than Earth's moon. Automated factories worked constantly, building vessels at a rate that seemed impossible. If this fleet was completed, Earth would face overwhelming force. No amount of courage or clever tactics would matter. Hana reported her findings to Earth Command. The news caused immediate crisis meetings at the highest levels. General G1 studied the intelligence and came to a difficult conclusion. Earth could not wait for the fleet to be completed. They had to strike first. But attacking a fortified shipyard was suicide. The losses would be catastrophic. Yet doing nothing guaranteed defeat. Engineer Yeji worked on a new technology that might help. She called it the quantum shield. It was based on principles that Dr. Minho had discovered while studying the captured battlecruiser. The shield worked by making ships exist in two quantum states simultaneously. To enemy sensors, the ship appeared to be in two places at once. Weapons targeting the ship would hit the wrong location. It was not true invisibility, but it was close. The problem was production. Yeji could build the shields, but it took time. Earth needed hundreds of them, and they had perhaps 6 weeks before the Varric's fleet would be complete. She organized every available factory and engineer. They worked around the clock. Sleep became a luxury. Mistakes were common due to exhaustion, but they pushed forward anyway. Ambassador Kyung-soo continued his diplomatic campaign across the galaxy. Using the communication protocol stolen from the Varric's battlecruiser, he sent messages directly to conquered worlds. The messages were not broadcasts that could be intercepted. They were personal communications sent to individuals who might be sympathetic to resistance. Responses came slowly at first, then faster. Dozens of worlds expressed interest in Earth's experiences. They wanted to know how to fight back, how to organize resistance, how to maintain hope when facing overwhelming odds. Kyung-soo shared everything: tactical manuals, technical specifications, psychological strategies. He was building a network of rebellion across the Varric's dominion. The Varric's high command became aware of these communications. They were horrified. The stability of their entire empire depended on conquered species remaining passive. If multiple worlds rebelled simultaneously, the Dominion could collapse. They held emergency meetings to discuss what to do about Earth. The debates became heated. Some noble houses wanted to destroy Earth completely, turning it into a warning to others. Other houses argued that such brutality would only inspire more resistance. Dr. Sunmi analyzed the intercepted Varric's communications. She noticed something interesting. The tone of the debates had changed. Early in the war, Varric's leaders spoke with confidence and arrogance. Now they sounded worried and defensive. They were arguing with each other instead of presenting a united front. The war was causing political cracks in their society. She shared this analysis with General Ji-won and Ambassador Kyung-soo. They realized that Earth was not just fighting a military war anymore. They were fighting a political and psychological war too. Every day they survived was another day of embarrassment for the Varrics. Every small victory was magnified by the fact that it came from a supposedly primitive species. Sergeant Daeho and his special forces executed another raid. This time they targeted a Varric's communication relay station on Mars. The station coordinated all alien military communications in the solar system. Destroying it would blind the enemy temporarily. Daeho's team landed on Mars in stealth shuttles and approached the facility on foot. The Varrics had guards, but they were not expecting ground attack on Mars. They assumed humans could not operate effectively in the thin Martian atmosphere. They were wrong. Daeho's team wore advanced suits that allowed them to move normally in low gravity and low atmosphere. They infiltrated the facility and planted explosives. But before they destroyed it, they installed monitoring equipment designed by Dr. Minho. When the relay station was rebuilt, Earth would be able to intercept everything that went through it. The numbers were terrible, but they could have been 3 months into the war. General Ji-won made a bold decision. Defense was working, but defense alone would never win the war. Earth needed to take the fight to the enemy. She proposed Operation Moonrise, an attack on the Varix staging area near the moon. Many military leaders thought the plan was suicide. The Varix had dozens of ships in lunar orbit. Earth's fleet was smaller and less advanced, but Ji-won argued that surprise and determination could overcome superior numbers. Admiral Soo-hyun was chosen to lead the attack. He was 45 years old and had been an astronaut before becoming a military officer. He understood space combat better than anyone else in Earth's forces. He took command of a fleet that included military vessels, converted civilian ships built by engineer Yeji, and experimental prototypes that had never been tested in real combat. It was not an impressive fleet by Varix standards, but it was everything Earth could spare. The fleet left Earth orbit under cover of a massive electronic warfare operation. Dr. Minho's team created false sensor readings that made it appear Earth was launching attacks in multiple directions. The Varix split their forces to respond to the fake threats. By the time they realized what was happening, Soo-hyun's fleet was already approaching the moon. The battle began at dawn, Earth time. Human ships emerged from behind the moon and opened fire immediately. They did not try to match the Varix in a traditional engagement. Instead, they used swarm tactics. Dozens of small converted civilian ships attacked single large Varix vessels. They were like wolves hunting bears, individually weak but together overwhelming. Major Hana led the fighter squadrons. She had been training pilots in zero-gravity combat for months. Now they put that training to use. Human fighters were still slower and less powerful than Varix craft. But Hana had developed new tactics. Her pilots used kamikaze drones controlled by artificial intelligence. The drones would fly directly at Varix ships and explode. The aliens wasted ammunition shooting down drones while human fighters attacked from different angles. The tactic was brutal, but effective. Each drone cost less than a single missile and could carry more explosives. The Varix had never seen anything like it. They were shocked that humans would waste expensive technology so carelessly. They did not understand that Earth's industrial capacity was fully mobilized. Factories were producing drones faster than they could be used. Resources that used to make cars and computers now made weapons. Hana destroyed 3 Varix capital ships in the first hour of fighting. She led her squadron in a coordinated strike that overwhelmed the alien shields. When the 3rd ship exploded, she felt no satisfaction, just tired determination. This was her life now. Wake up, fight, survive, sleep a few hours, repeat. She had stopped counting how many alien ships she had destroyed. The number did not matter. What mattered was that Earth was still fighting. Admiral Soo-hyun commanded the battle from his flagship, a converted cargo hauler that Yeji had personally rebuilt. It was not pretty, but it had thick armor and powerful weapons. He watched the tactical display as the battle unfolded. The Varix were confused by human tactics. They kept expecting Earth's forces to follow predictable combat patterns. Instead, humans did unexpected things. Small ships rammed large ones. Fighters retreated and then suddenly reversed course. Damaged vessels that should have fled instead moved closer and exploded. The psychological impact on the Varix was immense. They had conquered many worlds, but always through overwhelming superiority. Their victories were clean and efficient. This battle was messy and chaotic. Humans fought with a savage desperation that Varix officers found disturbing. Even when a human ship was destroyed, it often took an alien vessel with it. The Varix started to fear engaging human forces at close range. Back on Earth, Dr. Minho achieved another breakthrough. His team had been studying Varix quantum communication technology for months. It was incredibly complex, using principles that human scientists barely understood. But Minho was brilliant, and he had help from the best minds on Earth. They finally cracked the encryption system. Suddenly, Earth could listen to every Varix communication. The intelligence they gained was invaluable. Earth learned about Varix supply chains, troop movements, and strategic plans. But more importantly, they learned something unexpected. The Varix Dominion was not as unified as it appeared. Multiple noble houses competed for power. Different military factions disagreed on strategy. Some Varix leaders questioned whether conquering Earth was worth the cost. Dr. Sunmi joined Minho's team to analyze the communications. She was 31 years old and had studied xenolinguistics, the science of alien languages. Before the war, her work had been purely theoretical. Now it was critical to survival. She listened to Varix conversations and learned about their culture, their fears, their weaknesses. What she discovered was fascinating. The Variks valued honor and reputation above everything else. Their entire society was built on the idea of easy conquest and overwhelming power. A military commander who failed was not just defeated but socially destroyed. Commander Talmor was now in a terrible position. He had promised his superiors an easy victory. Instead, he was losing. Ambassador Kyung-soo took this information and formulated a new strategy. Earth could not just fight the Variks militarily. They needed to fight them politically and psychologically too. He began broadcasting messages directly to the Variks home system. The messages were simple. Earth did not want war. Earth just wanted to survive. But if the Variks continued attacking, Earth would make them pay a terrible price. He also sent secret messages to species that the Variks had conquered. These messages were different. They offered hope. They showed that resistance was possible. They explained the tactics Earth was using. They shared technical information about Variks' weaknesses. Kyung-soo was not just defending Earth anymore. He was starting a galaxy-wide resistance movement. The Battle of Lunar Orbit lasted 8 hours. When it ended, Earth had lost 40% of its attacking fleet. But the Variks had lost 60% of their ships in the area. More importantly, the Variks supply depot on the dark side of the moon was destroyed. Admiral Soo-hyun's forces had completed their mission. The surviving ships returned to Earth as heroes. During the battle, Sergeant Deho and his Special Forces team were executing their own mission. They infiltrated a Variks supply ship that had landed in the Australian outback. The ship was massive, carrying enough weapons and ammunition to supply an army. Deho's team planted explosives throughout the vessel. When the ship tried to take off, it exploded, creating a fireball visible from orbit. But that was not Deho's real objective. Before destroying the ship, his team stole valuable intelligence data. Computer files containing the location of every Variks base in the solar system, details about their command structure, information about their political leadership. This data was rushed to Dr. Minho and Dr. Sunmi for analysis. What they found shocked everyone. The Variks Dominion controlled 7 star systems, but they were not a monolithic empire. They were more like a collection of noble houses held together by tradition and military power. The noble houses competed with each other constantly. Some were conservative and cautious. Others were aggressive and expansionist. The house that controlled the Earth invasion was relatively young and trying to prove itself. This information gave Earth new options. They were not just fighting a powerful empire. They were fighting one faction within a divided political system. If Earth could make the invasion costly enough, the other noble houses might pressure for withdrawal. The war became as much about politics as military action. Commander Talmor received an order from his superiors. Capture a human military leader alive. The Variks High Command wanted to understand how primitive humans were defeating advanced technology. Talmor organized a raid on a human command center in Tokyo. The raid failed. Human forces had detected the attack thanks to intercepted communications. They were waiting with an ambush. The ambush turned into a fierce battle that destroyed an entire city district. Variks ground troops fought human soldiers in close combat. The aliens were stronger and had better weapons, but humans knew the terrain and fought with desperate courage. The Variks eventually retreated, leaving behind dozens of dead and several captured soldiers. For the first time in the war, humans had Variks prisoners. Dr. Sunmi was assigned to interrogate the prisoners. She approached them not as enemies, but as fellow intelligent beings. She spoke to them about their culture, their history, their motivations. Slowly, some of them began to talk. They revealed information that changed Earth's understanding of the war. The Variks were not evil. They were not cruel by nature. They had simply built a society where conquest was normal and expected. Every young Variks officer dreamed of leading a successful invasion. It was how they proved themselves and gained status. But they had never encountered real resistance before. Most species surrendered after a brief show of force. The Variks assumed this was because they were naturally superior. They never considered that other species surrendered because they had no hope of winning. Earth had given the galaxy something new. Hope. Proof that resistance was possible. Word of the Battle of Lunar Orbit spread through the Variks communication networks. Conquered species heard. The morning sky over Seoul turned dark at exactly 9:47 a.m. People stopped walking on the streets and looked up. The sun disappeared behind something huge, something impossible. A massive alien ship floated above the city. so large that it covered the entire downtown area in shadow. Within minutes, similar ships appeared over Tokyo, New York, London, Mumbai, and 50 other major cities around the world. Ambassador Kyung-soo stood in the emergency command center deep below the presidential building. He was 47 years old, a former military officer who had spent the last 20 years trying to prevent wars instead of fighting them. Now he faced a war that nobody on Earth was ready for. The screens around him showed the alien ships. They just floated there, silent and threatening. A message came through on all frequencies. The voice spoke perfect Korean, perfect English, perfect every human language at once. It said the Varix Dominion claimed Earth as their territory. Humans had 24 hours to surrender completely. Any resistance would result in total destruction. The message was cold and simple. It treated humanity like insects that needed to be removed from a garden. Kyung-soo volunteered to meet with them. Someone had to try to talk, to buy time, to find any possible way to avoid bloodshed. He took a shuttle up to the largest ship hovering over the Pacific Ocean. The inside of the alien vessel was strange. Everything looked organic, like walking through the inside of a living creature. Purple lights pulsed along the walls. The air smelled like metal and something else he could not identify. Commander Talmor waited in a vast chamber. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with skin that looked like gray stone and eyes that glowed red. He wore armor that seemed to be part of his body. When he spoke, his mouth barely moved, but Kyung-soo heard the words clearly in his mind. The conversation was short. Talmor explained that the Varix Dominion controlled 7 star systems. They conquered primitive worlds to use their resources. Earth had minerals they needed. Humans could choose to work as slaves or die. There was no third option. Kyung-soo tried everything he knew. He offered trade agreements, cultural exchange, peaceful coexistence. Talmor laughed at each suggestion. He said humans were children playing with toys, pretending to be adults. When Kyung-soo returned to Earth, he delivered the bad news. The world leaders had already known what the answer would be. Nobody really believed the aliens would negotiate. But they had needed to try. Now there was only one choice left: fight or die. The attack began exactly 24 hours after the first message. Beams of red light shot down from the ships. Buildings exploded. Streets melted. Thousands of people died in seconds. The aliens targeted military bases first, then government buildings, then anything that looked important. Earth's military fought back immediately. Fighter jets launched from every base that still existed. Missiles flew upward toward the alien ships. Major Hana was already in the air when the attack started. She flew an F-35 fighter jet from the Osan Air Base. She was 29 years old and one of the best pilots in the Korean Air Force. When the red beams started falling, she pushed her jet to maximum speed and headed straight for the alien ship over Seoul. Her squadron followed her, 12 jets against a ship the size of a mountain. They fired missiles. Most of them exploded harmlessly against an invisible shield around the alien vessel. But Hana noticed something. When multiple missiles hit the same spot at almost the same time, the shield flickered. Just for a fraction of a second, but it flickered. She radioed her squadron. They changed their attack pattern. Instead of spreading out, they focused all their missiles on one small section of the shield. They timed their shots perfectly. The shield flickered again, longer this time. One missile got through. It hit the alien ship's hull and exploded. The damage was tiny. Just a small black mark on the massive vessel, but it proved something important. The aliens could be hurt. Alien fighter craft poured out of the big ships. They looked like silver insects with wings made of energy. They were faster than human jets, more agile. Their weapons were more powerful. Hana's squadron fought them in the sky over Seoul. She lost 3 pilots in the first 2 minutes. The alien craft moved in ways that seemed to ignore physics. They turned at impossible angles and accelerated without any visible thrust. But Hana had been flying since she was 18 years old. She knew every trick, every maneuver, every way to survive when the enemy was better than you. She flew her jet low, weaving between buildings. The alien pilots followed her. They were fast but not used to flying through cluttered environments. One of them clipped a skyscraper and exploded. Another followed her into a tight canyon between 2 tall buildings and could not pull up in time. By the end of the first day, Hana had shot down 4 alien fighters. She had also discovered their weakness. They relied too much on their technology. Their pilots were skilled but predictable. They followed patterns. Humans were messy, creative, and desperate. Sometimes that was enough. Deep underground in Busan, Dr. Minho worked in a secret laboratory. He was 38 years old, a quantum physicist who had spent his entire career studying theoretical possibilities that most people said were impossible. When the invasion started, the military brought him pieces of destroyed alien technology. They needed to understand it. They needed to find weaknesses. Minho barely slept. He examined every piece of alien metal, every fragment of their circuits, every bit of data he could extract from their destroyed fighters. What he found amazed and terrified him. The Varix technology was incredibly advanced but also rigid. Everything was designed to work in very specific ways. There was no room for adaptation or creativity. They built perfect machines that followed perfect rules. Humans built messy machines that barely worked half the time but could be modified, improved, and adapted to new situations. Minho realized that this was humanity's advantage. Not better technology, but better thinking. The ability to look at a problem and find 10 different solutions instead of just one perfect answer. He called Kyung-soo with his findings. The ambassador was in a different bunker, coordinating with military leaders from around the world. When Minho explained his theory, Kyung-soo understood immediately. If the Varix were predictable, they could be beaten. It would not be easy. It would cost millions of lives. But it was possible. The first day of the invasion ended with 20 million people dead. Major cities around the world were partially destroyed. But humanity had not surrendered. The military forces of every nation had united under a single command structure. Resources were being pooled together. Scientists like Minho were sharing their discoveries globally within minutes. Kyung-soo stood in the command center and looked at the global tactical display. Red markers showed where the alien ships were positioned. Blue markers showed human military units. There were far more red markers than blue ones. The odds were terrible, but humans had survived terrible odds before. He gave the order to activate Project Taeguk. It was a program that had been developed in secret for 30 years, ever since the first radio signals from space had been detected. Nobody had really believed aliens would attack Earth, but some people had prepared anyway, just in case. Now those preparations would be tested. Deep beneath mountains around the world, hidden facilities began to wake up. Weapons that had never been fired started to power on. Soldiers who had trained for a war nobody believed would happen moved into position. Commander Talmor watched Earth from orbit. He expected the humans to surrender any moment now. Every other species had surrendered after the first day. The destruction and death always broke their will to fight. But the reports coming in from his officers confused him. Human military units were regrouping. They were not fleeing. They were not hiding. They were preparing for more combat. For the first time in his long military career, Talmor felt something he did not immediately recognize. It took him several minutes to understand what the feeling was. Uncertainty. He had never been uncertain in battle before. He sent a message to his superiors in the Varix home system. He requested additional support. He did not say it directly, but the meaning was clear. Earth might actually be dangerous. The station exploded just as Varix reinforcements arrived. Daeho's team barely escaped. The intelligence was undeniable. The Varix were preparing a final massive invasion fleet, 10 times larger than their initial force. If that fleet reached Earth, no amount of courage or clever tactics would save humanity. The ships would simply overwhelm every defense. General Ji-won looked at the projections and made a decision that shocked everyone in the command center. Earth would not wait to be attacked. They would strike the Varix homeworld directly. The proposal seemed insane. The Varix homeworld was deep in their territory, protected by defensive systems that had never been tested in real combat. The journey would take weeks through space controlled by the enemy. Even if Earth's fleet somehow reached the target, they would be attacking the most heavily defended planet in the Dominion. Many military leaders argued against the plan, but Ji-won explained her reasoning. The Varix expected humans to defend. They would never anticipate an attack on their capital. Surprise was worth more than firepower. Dr. Minho calculated that Earth had 3 weeks before the new Varix fleet would be complete and ready to launch. 3 weeks to plan, prepare, and execute the most dangerous military operation in human history. He also presented one more critical piece of information. The data recovered from the captured battlecruiser contained the access codes for Varix military facilities. Those codes might still work. They could give Earth's forces a way to disable defensive systems around the homeworld. Admiral Soo-hyun accepted command of the strike force. He assembled a fleet of 200 vessels. Military warships formed the core, but most of the fleet consisted of converted civilian ships built and modified by engineer Yeji. Every ship was equipped with the new quantum shields. They could travel through Varric space with a reasonable chance of avoiding detection. Reasonable, but not certain. This mission could easily become a one-way trip. Ambassador Kyung-soo insisted on joining the mission, not as a soldier or commander, but as a witness and moral guide. He argued that Earth needed someone to ensure the operation remained a military strike and did not become an act of genocide. The Variks were the enemy, but they were also intelligent beings with their own culture and history. Victory should not require abandoning humanity's values. General Ji-won reluctantly agreed. She assigned Kyung-soo a place on the flagship, but gave him no authority to interfere with tactical decisions. The fleet departed Earth in complete silence. No broadcasts announced their departure. Electronic emissions were minimized. The ships traveled in loose formation, spread across thousands of kilometers of space. If enemy sensors detected them, they would appear as random debris or minor anomalies. The journey to the Varrics' homeworld would take 18 days at maximum sustainable speed. As the fleet traveled, volunteers from liberated Varrics colonies joined them. These were species that had recently thrown off Dominion control after being inspired by Earth's resistance. They brought their own ships and warriors. The combined force became a symbol of something larger than just Earth survival. It represented the possibility of freedom for every oppressed species in the galaxy. Major Hana commanded the fighter wing. She had trained hundreds of pilots from Earth and allied species. They had practiced together until they could coordinate attacks without verbal communication. Hand signals and light codes replaced radio transmissions. Every pilot knew that breaking radio silence could doom the entire mission. They flew in absolute discipline, something that would have been impossible at the start of the war. On the 12th day of travel, the fleet encountered a Variks patrol. 3 enemy ships detected the anomalies and moved to investigate. Admiral Soo-hyun faced a critical decision. If they destroyed the patrol, the Variks would know something was wrong. But if they let the patrol get close enough to see through the quantum shields, the entire mission would be compromised. He decided to take the risk and continue forward, hoping the patrol would dismiss the sensor readings as errors. The tactic worked. The patrol ship scanned the area and found nothing definitive. They reported possible sensor malfunctions and continued on their route. The fleet maintained course, but every crew member knew how close they had come to disaster. The incident reminded them that luck played as large a role as skill in warfare. On the 18th day, they reached the outer defensive perimeter of the Variks home system. Sensors showed hundreds of defensive platforms, automated weapon stations, and patrol vessels. This was the first real test. Dr. Minho transmitted the stolen access codes. For several agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Then defensive systems began to power down across an entire sector. The codes worked. A gap opened in the defenses just wide enough for the fleet to pass through. They moved forward quickly. The gap would not last long. Automated security protocols would detect the unauthorized shutdown and reactivate systems. The fleet had perhaps 30 minutes to get through. Ships pushed their engines beyond safe limits. 2 vessels suffered mechanical failures and had to be abandoned. Their crews transferred to other ships in desperate emergency evacuations. But the fleet made it through the gap just seconds before defensive platforms came back online. Now they were inside the home system. The Variks homeworld appeared on sensors, a massive planet with 3 moons. Orbital facilities surrounded it like a metal ring. Thousands of ships moved in organized traffic patterns. This was the heart of the Dominion, and it had never been attacked in its entire history. That was about to change. Admiral Soo-hyun gave the order. The fleet dropped their quantum shields and opened fire. Surprise was total. Variks commanders could not believe what their sensors showed. Human ships, alien allied vessels, all attacking their capital. Impossible. Yet it was happening. For precious minutes, the defenders hesitated, unable to process the reality of the situation. Hana led the fighter assault on orbital shipyards. Her squadrons targeted the construction facilities building the new invasion fleet. Missiles struck half-completed warships. Explosions rippled across the orbital ring. Decades of construction work destroyed in minutes. The psychological impact was devastating. The Variks had believed their home system was invulnerable. Now they watched it burn. Sergeant Deho's special forces launched from modified shuttles heading for the planet's surface. Their mission was critical. They needed to disable the planetary shield generators. Without those shields down, the fleet could not threaten the planet directly. Deho's team used stolen Varix equipment to mask their approach. They landed near a shield facility disguised as a Varix maintenance crew. The disguise worked long enough to get them inside. Then they dropped the pretense and fought their way to the generator control room. Varix security forces responded quickly, but they were disorganized. Nobody had ever trained for defending against ground assault on the homeworld. Deho's team fought through them and reached the generators. They planted explosives set on a timer and evacuated. The generators exploded in a chain reaction that cascaded across the planetary shield network. Within minutes, the shields were down. Admiral Suhyun moved the fleet into position above the Varix capital city. He did not fire. Instead, he waited. The message was clear. Earth had the capability to destroy the Varix homeworld. But they chose not to. They offered mercy when they could have chosen annihilation. Ambassador Kyung-soo broadcast a message on all Varix frequencies. He spoke calmly without anger or triumph. He explained that Earth did not want conquest or revenge. They wanted only to survive. The war could end today if the Varix chose to let it end. Humanity would withdraw their fleet and return home. All they asked was for the Varix to stop attacking Earth and recognize humanity's right to exist independently. The message played on repeat for hours, while the Varix High Command debated their response. Some nobles wanted to continue fighting regardless of the consequences. They argued that surrendering to primitives would destroy the Dominion's reputation. Others recognized reality. Earth had demonstrated that they could strike anywhere. The cost of continuing the war would be catastrophic. The debate became violent. Different noble houses had different interests. The house that had launched the Earth invasion faced complete disgrace. They fought desperately to avoid accepting responsibility for the disaster. But other houses saw an opportunity. If they could blame one faction for the failed invasion, they could increase their own power. Political calculation overcame military pride. A coup occurred. The noble house responsible for the Earth invasion was deposed. Their leaders were arrested. A new coalition took control of the Varix government. Their first act was to contact Admiral Suhyun and accept Earth's terms. The war was over, not through total victory or defeat, but through a negotiated settlement born from mutual exhaustion and respect. As the fleet prepared to return to Earth, they received messages from across the galaxy. Dozens of species that had been conquered by the Varix declared their independence. The Dominion's authority collapsed in a matter of days. Centuries of expansion ended because one small planet refused to surrender. The political map of the galaxy was redrawn almost overnight. Commander Talmor was captured during the final battle. He had been commanding a defense station when it was boarded by human forces. He surrendered without resistance, his spirit be,